I've said it before and I'll say it 1,000 times. The preseason is the best time for learning and improvement. Whether you want to learn a new champion or an entirely new role, now is the time to be doing it. There's plenty of time to be making all those silly mistakes that come with learning a new role, and more importantly, learning from those mistakes. Now, before we even get into the video, I'd like to ask you all to go into our comment section below and tell us something that you want us to cover in a video in the future. I try to cover things that I think are going to be most applicable to everyone across all ELOs, but it turns out that sometimes I'm just out of touch with certain ELOs. If there's anything specifically that you want to learn that you don't understand, then let me know in a comment down below. If you haven't already, then make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We're constantly adding guides on new champions and updating older guides, so if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. Now, without further ado, here are my tips that will help you learn a new role during this preseason. It doesn't matter whether or not you want to learn an entirely new role as your primary role, or you're just learning a new role for your secondary role. This is going to help you in either case. The first thing, of course, that you're going to want to do, and this one is a little bit obvious, is you're going to want to just play games on that role. Now, you want to do this first and foremost before you look up anything on that role, so you can get a feel for where you are on the map in your new role, whether this is top lane, bot lane, mid, jungle, or support. All of these things have unique, different things about them, and they center around a different place in the map. You want to get comfortable and used to all of the new things in the role that you're in. This is going to take you quite a few games, probably anywhere from 20 to 50 games before you're really comfortable with the role. And when you are playing these first few games, I really recommend that you only play a few champions, hopefully ones that you're already familiar with. Starting with a champion that you already play, or a really simple champion, is good because it allows you to adjust to the role itself, and you won't be so focused on learning the actual champion that you're playing at the same time. If you're starting completely from scratch on this role and you've never played it before, then I recommend champions like Garen for top lane. For jungle, Warwick or Amumu. Mid lane, it would be Malzahar. ADC, Caitlyn. And for support, something like Janna. The reason being is the skill floor on these champions is quite a bit lower than other champions. This means you really don't need to focus in order to play them at their baseline, which allows you to learn the actual role that you're playing as opposed to the champion that you're playing. If you're an ADC main and you're looking to become a one-trick pony Riven top lane, don't just start with Riven. Start by playing Garen top lane so you can actually learn top, and then pick up Riven afterwards. If you just jump in right away trying to learn Riven top lane when you've never played a single game of Riven or top lane before in your entire life, then things are going to be very overwhelming and your improvement is going to be very slow. Play just a few games on those really simple champions, just 10 to 20 games, and that will allow you to really focus on the role itself and get used to that role, and then you can move on to the more complex stuff that seems interesting to you. Once you've learned the basics of your role, you're ready to move on. This is going to be stuff like kiting camps in the jungle and pathing properly. For laners, it's going to be wave management, making sure you know when to slow push, when to freeze, when to keep a neutral lane, that sort of thing. Your next step is going to be watching other people play your role, preferably people who are a lot better than you. Most of the time when you're watching these people play that role, you're going to be seeing them do things that you know that you're not doing, and you're going to be able to see them play from a different perspective. They're definitely going to have a different playstyle from you, and you can see whether or not you like that playstyle and if it's something that you want to adapt. Now, one thing that's really important with this tip is you want to make sure that you watch multiple different people who play the same role. All of these different people are going to have different specialties, things that they're really good at, and the more people that you watch, the more it's going to open you up to seeing new things that you've never seen before. It's better to watch 4 different people for 2 hours each than to watch one person for 8 hours. You can also try to focus on the parts of the game that you're struggling with the most. Whenever I was first learning each and every role, I would watch countless hours of VODs back, watching specific matchups, watching certain laning phases, watching the late game in certain games. You don't have to watch the entirety of a game every single time. Sometimes it's better just to focus on the things that you're struggling with the most first. Now, you're still going to want to be playing while you're in this stage, but you want to play a little bit less than you were before. You're not just going to be spamming games now. Now you're also going to be watching other people a lot more than you're playing. This allows you to gain knowledge on the role that you otherwise would be unable to. Instead of getting this knowledge through trial and error, playing countless hours of the game, you're getting it just by watching somebody else for a few hours. The next step after this is to start watching your own games back. Remember, just because you have all of this newfound knowledge does not mean that you're implementing it properly. So you want to watch one of your own games back and compare it to the pros. That way you can see whether or not you are implementing it properly or if it still needs work. At this stage in your learning experience, you want to play a very small amount of games in between your VOD reviews. This is just 3 to 5 games before reviewing one of those games, looking at what you need to improve, and then playing 3 to 5 more. Once again, looking at what needs more improvement, and so on and so on. This is what allows you to tweak those finer details. The goal here is to fix any huge overarching problems if you still have any, but it's also to fix the smaller, minute details. Oftentimes if there's a huge problem, for example, you don't ward enough and you die too much to ganks, then this is something that you can see just by watching your own replay. But the smaller things you might need to compare to a pro play to see that it's actually a problem. For example, you might be warding at the wrong time. This is something that you should do in your own play, even if you're not learning a new role, because it is what allows you to improve once you have plateaued. Next up, I do want to talk about how you can develop a good champion pool, because you can't just one-trick the simplest champions forever. Well, you can, but ideally you shouldn't be. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, your first few games you do want to have on very simple champions. This is going to be the first 10 to 20 games, but then you can start to explore other champions that pique your interest. Ideally, when creating a new champion pool, you want to be focused on learning the champion and not the role. This is why I personally think that it's really good to have a small champion pool of just 2 to 3 champions until you're really familiar with the role before you expand to other champions. Usually I recommend that your first 50 to 100 games when learning a role should all be on the same 2 to 3 champions. That way you're focused on learning the role and you can get the ins and outs of the role down before focusing on your champion pool. Once you are familiar with the role, you need to make sure that you're learning one champion at a time. If it's your first time playing a champion, then make sure you go into the practice tool, learn what all of their abilities do, try and practice some combos, see how those abilities interact with each other. You really don't want to go into a game first timing a champion without knowing what their abilities do, what their item builds are, what skill order to have, because this is going to make it so that you have no clue what you're doing, and instead of learning the champion, you're just going to spend the majority of the game figuring out what their abilities do and their items, all of which can be done beforehand. Go into a practice tool game, lock in that champion, and just mess around with them for a little bit until they feel a little familiar in your hands. You get used to the auto animations, their ability animations, and the such. Immediately after that, you want to look up a skill order and build. Usually I use u.gg for this and then sort by the runes and builds section. That gives me some pretty good builds and runes that are typically going to work. By doing this, even your first game on a champion, you're going to generally know what you're doing, and you're going to be able to actually focus on things that matter, things that you need to learn through experience, like farming, trade patterns, how you want to push waves, what abilities you want to be using in order to do that, those sort of things. The first 5 to 10 games are going to be focused on that, and then once you're able to get a feel for the champion, that's when you again want to start looking at other people play that champion. In this case, you want to look for specific one tricks, and instead of watching multiple different one tricks, you just want to watch the best one trick that you can find. When watching a one trick, it's very important to try to watch only 1 to 2 of these people in order to learn, because these people do things differently from other people who play that champion, and those differences are what's important. You don't want to develop bad habits by watching a lower rated one trick, because this is going to be a little bit detrimental. Find the highest rated one trick that you can, watch their games, learn as much from their champion as you can, and then again, go back into your own games and play that champion, applying the knowledge that you've gained. Once 3 to 5 games have passed, then watch a review of your own game, compare it to that one trick's game, and see the differences. This is going to give you a general idea of what you need to improve on for the specific champion. With this, you're not going to be looking at macro as much, you're more going to look at micro and mechanical play. Just repeat this for however many champions you want in your champion pool. A good thing to keep in mind is that you only want to be working on 1 or 2 champions at once. You don't want to be practicing 5 or 6 champions, because then you're not going to be able to put in the amount of time that you need. That is just about all that I have for you for today's video on learning new roles and champions during this preseason. If you haven't already, then make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We've got courses both on the 5 fundamental roles, as well as champion-specific courses, so if that is something that interests you, make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. As always, I'm Panther, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.